from CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, and outside of Washington, D.C. This is a very special edition of the Conservative Commandos radio show.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to healthcare or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty
Health Share. This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
And joining me today is my co-host Sharon Angle. And Sharon, we've got a very special guest to start the day rolling.
Yes, we do. We have Kelly Vlahos. Is that right,
That's
Vlahos?
right, yes.
And she's the executive editor of the American Conservative. Tell me, the American Conservative. I feel like I'm the American Conservative. Rick is an American Conservative. So tell me how, it sounds generic to me.
Yeah.
Give me something specific about American Conservative that our listeners will say, I need to be a part of that group.
Well, we were started in 2002 by someone you probably know well, Patrick Buchanan, in opposition to the Iraq war policy, which might not sound very conservative if you were around in 2002. But what Pat was looking for was an America first foreign policy. He felt like the run-up to the war, driven by the neoconservatives in Washington, was bad for the country. It was not in our best interest to be there. He started a magazine to sort of buck the status quo on that front. It was a scrappy little magazine, and we feel that we were right. We feel after all of the disaster of Iraq, the continuing disaster in Afghanistan, that the war policies perpetuated by the establishment in Washington have been a failure for American interests. So we have continued this a magazine agenda for realism and restraint, America first foreign policy, and we think we're doing a good job.
Well, then you must be thrilled with President Trump's foreign policy, are you?
Well, we're hopeful. When he was running for president in 2016, he made a lot of great statements about getting our soldiers out of every hot spot in the world, stop being the world's police. He included the war in Iraq as his impetus for taking that stand, and that was everything that we've been talking about for the last 15 years. We feel pretty hopeful that he's continuing that since we haven't gotten in any new wars since he was elected. We feel that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, that we would have probably been very knee-deep in Syria right now. He's actually trying to get us out of Syria, and as you can see, the establishment in Washington has been bucking that the entire way. So we support getting out of Syria, ending the war in Afghanistan, not creating this massive footprint of American primacy throughout the world. And we think that President Trump is going in the right direction on that.
Well, now, I'm the person who lived through the Vietnam War.
Me too.
That's my generation. But the generation before, my dad's generation, the greatest generation, fought in a war that I was talking to a veteran the other day, and he said, nobody even remembers us. He's a Korean War veteran, and I've been watching this whole thing with Kim Jong-un. So talk to us a little bit about the policy there, and then I want you to answer a very specific question, and that is, do you think there's ever going to be a united Korea?
Which one would you want first?
Oh, let's go with the historical stuff, and then we'll move right into how that plays.
I'm probably a rarity in Washington, in our magazine as well, in that I support what Donald Trump has been doing in North Korea. I think if you look at the recent history of negotiations from Clinton all the way forward, that they're low-level negotiations, they're back and forth, we'll sanction you, we'll give you aid, we'll sanction you, we'll give you aid, has not worked. I feel like for whatever reason, and President Trump likes a good show, he has pursued a policy where he is going to meet one-on-one with Kim Jong-un. He's the first one to do that. Kim Jong-un's father had actually asked to meet Clinton and he refused. So we're in a new era here where we're looking at high-level negotiations as opposed to the low-level ones, which didn't work. Now, you could say, the news this morning, they didn't get a deal the way that they had hoped for. We don't know all the details yet. It sounds like President Trump had said that Kim Jong-un was looking for an end of sanctions before he denuclearizes, and that was that. He would not accept such a bold agreement, and he's leaving Vietnam as we speak. I feel, though, that he has created an opening so that these talks can go on, and personally, I think that incremental deals is the more practical way to go. I don't know if that's in the cards because we don't know the details, but how about a little bit of denuclearization for a little bit of ending of sanctions? And as you put on the table, the idea of ending officially the Korean War is also, I believe, should be on the table, and maybe reducing some of our presence there as well. But I feel like all this has to be incremental. And I personally feel that Donald Trump opened a window or a door or opportunity for this to happen that just hadn't existed under the 2 or 3 previous administrations. I don't care what these establishment types say. He's actually doing something where he's got Kim Jong-un actually talking and putting him out there and putting him on the record as actually talking about this. And let's face it, the missile testing has ended since I think November 17th was the last actual testing. So right there is success as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and I don't think that we think about this too much, but that Cold War is still going on. There's still a DMZ between North and South Korea. We still have troops on that border. And it seems to me, this war now that we are still kind of fighting, is that how you see it? That we are still in that conflict?
Yeah, we're still in a Cold War. Maybe it's not as cold as it was, say, 40, 50 years ago. But I think that there is impetus, there is a desire on the part of the South Koreans to reunite with their North Korean counterparts. There are so many families that have been separated. There's a lot of pain and suffering on the part of the North Koreans. We can't forget that they are still starving, that they are still living in a crippled economy. I believe that Kim Jong-un wants to reunify. He wants to move forward. There's been some indications that he's relaxed and opened his markets. He knows that this is the way it has to ultimately go. It's just that he also wants control too. So we can't sugarcoat it.
Right.
So, but I do think there is a desire on both sides to reunify. It's like, how is that going to happen? Who's going to be in control? I don't think the North Koreans are going to get rid of their nuclear weapons. They see, Kim Jong-un looks at someone like Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, others who have dealt with the U.S., have denuclearized or given up their weapons or let inspectors in, and then they were killed. So I think it's a deterrence. He's probably going to keep it. The best we can hope for is to end the war, put some transparency in where they opened up some of those weapons to scrutiny, and hopefully both sides can maybe get it together over time, and that might reduce our footprint there, which would relax the Cold War posture that we have. I mean, personally, that's what people in my magazine have been sort of writing about for the last year or so. It's really a more realistic look at it instead of this zero-sum game. You get rid of your nukes or we're just going to keep crushing you with sanctions, because obviously that hasn't worked. The maximum pressure hasn't worked.
Kelly Vlahos, with Conservative American or American Conservative. We need to take just a short break for our sponsors. Can you stay with us here
Absolutely.
at CPAC? Great, thank you.
Have you been leasing a property for your business or renting storage space? Are you tired of paying rent year after year? Call the experts at General Steel to own a building at up to 30% off now.
I'd been renting a building and paying someone else's mortgage, but General Steel showed me how I could own a space tailored to the needs of my business and for less than renting.
Call General Steel now at the number on your screen for our current building specials and to price your metal building system today.
My building's the dream I've had since finishing my house 14 years ago. I've been using it for a garage, workshop, and storage area for my tools and equipment, and I can't believe how great it turned out.
The economy is improving and the price of steel is expected to rise. Stop waiting. It could cost you thousands. Call General Steel now to see how you can own for less than you thought. Stop waiting to start your business or expand your operation. Call General Steel now.
Call 877-484-7002.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business, according to The Secret War, a shocking new research report. I just read it. And folks, I was amazed to learn why banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get The Secret War free. Just call the number on the screen, no charge, from the folks at Swiss America. And get this, did you know simply spending cash today may be enough to have you branded as a potential criminal? That's right. The new war on cash is really a war against all freedom-loving Americans. The Secret War is yours free, so call the number on the screen and you can tell them Pat Boone gave you the number.
Welcome back, listeners, to CPAC and Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Sharon Engel here, interviewing with Kelly Vlahos with American Conservative. We've been talking about foreign policy, and especially the foreign policy of Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. Interesting speculations that we've had about reunifying Korea and once and for all ending the Cold War there, because that would be just big, like tear down this wall,
Right.
wouldn't it, Kelly?
Absolutely, and I think that there is a desire on behalf of the American people to sort of bring troops home, bring our foreign policy home, start getting a more America-centric policy. There's no reason, sometimes the neoconservatives and the Houcks talk about, well, we have to have a presence in the world, we have to be paying attention, we have to engage. I'm not saying that we shouldn't engage. I'm just saying that we don't need to have boots on the ground, and I think there's 174 countries right now. It's unnecessary. I feel like we can respond to hostilities, attacks. We can continue to engage diplomatically with trade. This isn't an isolationist or engager scenario. It's being responsible, and I feel like we need to let South Korea and the Asian countries start taking control of their defense while still being a good ally. But I think that that's the movement we need to go to. It's been too long, and I feel, and my magazine feels, that what we've been doing, the status quo, isn't working.
Well, now you've opened up the whole of Asia, so I have to ask you about China because they're a big player there, and there seems to be some thought that China could play a big role with Korea, and also that China needs to come our way for a change. So talk a little bit about our China policy.
Yeah, I don't, it's funny that they have been brought in as a sort of interlocutor in some of these broader negotiation scenarios. But I feel like China has its own problems right now. They've been helping North Korea with their testing, with their arms. So they're not exactly a natural ally in this situation. But it is in their best interest that there is peace on that peninsula. I feel that they're right now, and from what I've been reading in the last 48 hours, that there are a lot of domestic turmoil there with their economy because of the tariffs, because of other domestic economic issues. They're cracking down on the citizenry there. They're getting a little nervous. Xi Jinping has consolidated power. So I feel I think if you asked me this question maybe 3 years ago when they seemed to be ascendant and testing the waters, no pun intended, with their ships in international territory, I would have said that they might have been more of a nefarious player. But I feel like bringing them in on any talks would be helpful. I can't tell you how it's going to play out, because if I was a military guy sitting here, he'd probably say that they're one of our greatest threats right now. I'm not so sure that's true, but there are a lot of people in the military who feel like that we should be gearing up for war in the Pacific as opposed to worrying about other hotspots right now.
Well, my last question has to do with the big threat, Russia, and not because I almost say that tongue in cheek, but it's because there's so much trying to tie Russia and some kind of conspiracy to President Trump for the 2020 race. But also it seems like Putin is an aggravator in this China-Asian diplomacy or policy that we're trying to craft here.
Right. Yeah, I'm of the mind, and many of the writers at the magazine are, is that it's a little bit more complicated than they're the agitator or they're the aggressor and we are just trying to sort of play chess around them. I feel like a lot of the policies that we've cultivated over the last 30 years, particularly since the fall of the Soviet Union, have been agitating them. And so it's gone back and forth, and I feel like China and Russia have become natural allies against us because they have been built up as our adversaries. So I'm not saying, like Kim Jong-un, I'm not here to say that Putin is some sort of sympathetic figure, because he certainly is not. But I feel they do just what we do, protect their interests. And so when they're protecting their interests, they look for natural allies. And China seems to be their natural ally right now. Just remember, in Venezuela, they've bonded against us in our backing of the opposition down there, Juan Guaidó. And so I feel like this sort of shift, where they are aligning, they're also in Syria. So I'm not the first to say that Putin is a monster. I'm just here to say that this is why we have to watch our policies and see and have a more rational, reasonable policies over time that will bring allies in as opposed to creating adversaries across the globe.
Well, Kelly Vlahos, we have to leave it there. Can you tell our listeners where they can follow you, where they can get in touch with American Conservative?
Yeah, we're at www.theamericanconservative.com, and we're on Twitter at amconmag.com, or at amconmag. And I'm at Twitter at Vlahos at TAC, so that's VLAHOS _@_TAC.
Thank you so much for being our guest here on Conservative Commandos radio show at CPAC, and God bless you, Kelly.
Too. Thanks.
And we'll be right back with our next guest after these short messages. We're coming to you again, Conservative Commandos, right here at CPAC.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1 and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to buyyourtimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. Buyyourtimeshare.com. That's buyyourtimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to healthcare or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
And welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show. This is a very special edition coming to you from CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference just outside of Washington, D.C. And we've got a long-time visitor to the Conservative Commandos joining us, and that is Curtis Houck. He's the managing editor for Newsbusters for the Media Research Center. Curtis, great to see you.
Great to be with you. It's another great CPAC already underway.
Absolutely. Well, a lot of news is happening in Washington. Yesterday with the Cohen hearings, I wanted to get your feelings about it and also your feelings as far as how is the quote-unquote mainstream media was handling.
Right, yeah. So last night, for Michael Cohen, my colleague Nick Fondacaro and I looked at CNN and MSNBC from 7 p.m. to midnight Eastern.
Wow.
We found only 12 minutes on the North Korea summit. You know, be it as it may, whatever the result was going to be, it was still a big news story. So we were interested to see how much time that they gave to that. And they only gave 12 minutes to that, and they ended up giving over 400 minutes to Michael Cohen. It was insane, 45 minutes or more in a lot of these cable news shows without commercials, if you take them out. So just some passing mentions, some 0 seconds on North Korea. One Lawrence O'Donnell show only had 7 seconds mentioning the president being in Vietnam. It was just absolutely incredible, the level of obsession that they have with that. And again, It shows how for too many news outlets, and particularly cable news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, they're not able to cover more than one story at once. They just don't want to, but also at the same time, it just shows that they don't have an interest in that. So imagine being someone for one of those networks in Vietnam. You flew halfway around the world, and your colleagues basically don't care. They're not at all that interested in giving you live shots, or you're just kind of like sitting around. I don't know what they were doing, because they weren't having to be on the air because they weren't talking about it.
Well, I didn't see much of the Cohen hearing because I was getting prepared to come down here to CPAC. However, the Cohen hearing has, what I saw this morning on the morning news, Cohen has been taken off by the Vietnam summit. That was abruptly stopped, and that seems to be the flavor of the day for the mainstream media.
Well, the reason that they're able to do that is because of the way that the summit ended. I think if there would have been a good result, for this president and Kim Jong-un, then they would have kept on Michael Cohen. Right. But the fact that the summit abruptly ended, there was no signing statement, there was no lunch, the two parties walked away, that wasn't a good sign, and that's obviously a chance for the news media to kind of gloat, if you will, about the lack of a deal or any sort of agreement going forward with this president. I think what's important to remember, though, is that they said that they've come away, that they're still willing to talk. They're both still interested in trying to work something out. And
I didn't hear any of that. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear, Curtis, I didn't hear any of that, just that it was cut short. They're saying, well, Trump failed, Trump didn't get a deal, they even canceled the luncheon, but no, there was no optimism at all coming from the mainstream media, at least what I saw this morning.
No, you're right about that, and that's the way it was last night as well. Jim Acosta and the rest of CNN gloating about it, suggesting that the Michael Cohen hearing was the reason that this whole thing fell apart, that the president's mind was in the right place. Kim Jong-un was like, that they're not that interested. They were wondering, if what this means, how much longer Trump will be president. So if Trump's not going to be president that much longer, the North Koreans might have just said, well, why do I need to negotiate with you? You're not going to be president much longer. So again, this news media, they're already trying to move ahead by mentioning that, this Cohen hearing is striking a stake, a bullet through the heart of the Trump presidency, as Norah O'Donnell on CBS did last night, or yesterday morning, looking at going off of paraphrasing Michael Cohen's insistence that he would take a bullet for the president, that, this was a bullet through the heart of the Trump presidency, that put it in peril, But again, as most people would agree that this was the first hearing of impeachment for the Democrats. Any notion that the Democrats running last year on anything other than impeachment, running on the issues and going to be sticking to the issues, you don't know your politics very well.
Right. Well, how's this playing? Do you have any sense how this is playing with the general public?
Right. I think it's interesting that both sides are continuing to talk. I mean, the way the president has not lifted sanctions. I think that's really important to understand, because in Cuba and Iran, the Obama administration was more than willing to let go of sanctions, bring more diplomats in, or in the case of Cuba now, our diplomats have been hurt by this weird audio disease or something, illness that's been the Russians, the Chinese, who knows who may have been up with that, or sending pallets of cash to the Iranians, really doing whatever is necessary to make them happy instead of get what the best deal is for the American people. Mm-hmm. And so the president, he has insisted, the North Koreans wanted all sanctions lifted if they kind of gave us an inch on terms of letting us know what their nuclear stockpile looked like. And that is, dangerous, that without any strings attached, a promise that they will do something only if we lift the sanctions first. You don't work in negotiations with an actor you don't exactly trust. You don't give them what they want, because they can just cut and run, and then you're left empty-handed. And the president wasn't willing to do that. He talked about how in business you have to be willing to walk away. And that's really what he did last night. But as I saw early this morning, CNN, they weren't interested in that explanation or that spin, if you will.
Well, walking away from summit, that's not unique. Ronald Reagan did that with Mikhail Gorbachev back in the 1980s. Reykjavik, yes. And so it's not unique, but the news media is making it sound like this is unique. This is unprecedented.
The president insisted in his press conference last night, or early this morning, that he could have done a deal. He could have given up all the sanctions and got this little bit inch from North Korea but we would have given away a mile. He knew that was not a good deal for the American people. He knew the news media would have, even the liberal news media would have realized, oh, that's probably not actually a good deal, and they would have been right about that. So the president said, you know what, instead of doing that, instead of just to say we got a deal, he decided to walk away to get a better deal. You don't just, you don't buy a car just because you want to buy a car. If it's a used car and it doesn't have very good history, you don't take a loan, if you're not able to pay it back. It's just basic common sense that sometimes you don't always say yes to everything, and that's what this president did.
Well, I think that what we're learning here, we do have a different kind of president than what we had with Barack Obama. Right. Barack Obama would have done anything, would have sold out anything to made a deal just to build his image,
right?
His legacy, should I say? And Donald Trump's a different kind of president. He is the deal maker. He couldn't make a deal with Kim Jong-un, so there is no deal. So I would like to think the American people would see this and say, hey, okay, he didn't make a deal, but he didn't make a deal for a very good reason. It would have been a bad deal for the United States of America.
Right, exactly. We want peace, of course, but we're not willing to do
that
at the expense of the national security of the country. Right. So that's one thing that I think the American people are able to it's pretty easy to see that, I would think. Despite the media's spin, you just listen to a soundbite of the president say that we could have had a deal and I chose to walk away from it. And again, people just know that they turn down things, and there are some people in life that are yes men. Other times that they're, people just say no to everything. But I think most people are kind of in between. If something doesn't look good, if something is not going to benefit you, and you see zero reason to give the other person that deal, you walk away. And that's what this president did. And again, CNN. Jim Acosta and friends did not want to deal with that. They would rather gloat about the Michael Cohen hearing and how the president is coming back to America with Michael Cohen going on and everything else, and the Mueller report, and he didn't get what he wanted in North Korea. So the two, they were perfectly orchestrated together to, clash with each other on that.
All right. Curtis Houck, Newsbusters Media Research Center, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on Conservative Commandos. Please tell our audience how they could find out more about Newsbusters and follow what you write.
Yeah, newsbusters.org. I'm at Curtis Houck on Twitter. No matter what time of the day, we'll try it. We have content. I was blogging 2-3 in the morning last night, writing about the CNN coverage of the Hanoi press conference, and whether it's Hispanic media, if you speak Espanol, or you want to look at business news, cultural news, that's Dan Gainor's territory, or MRC Tech Watch, they've got that as well. But we'll have it all for Newsbusters.
All right, Curtis Houck, again, thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
No problem, Rick.
And we are coming to you from the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C. This is the Conservative Commandos. We'll be right back after this break.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes. Now, people say, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Well, they were the ones doing it.
The integrity of one man, one vote doesn't apply at the Texas state legislature. There is no way to know if your representatives are voting for themselves.
Department, a Republican, reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England.
2 out of 3 voters nationwide believe that voter fraud is a serious problem in the U.S. today.
The process is rigged.
Both sides of the aisle are guilty.
Florida now has to tell the Department of Justice whether the state will comply with DOJ's demand to stop purging thousands of people from its voter rolls.
We have the sloppiest election system of any industrialized democracy.
Philadelphia flagged 50,000 duplicate registrations, so just think how many more slipped through.
It's almost impossible to detect. How do you get caught? You only get caught if you confess.
Election corruption is deeply embedded in America. Quote, election fraud is a crime that usually pays, unquote, writes Tracy Campbell in his book, Deliver the Vote, A History of Election Fraud, an American political tradition from 1742 to 2004. In 1742, the first Prime Minister of Britain in the American colonies, Robert Walpole, was forced to resign.
We have a right not to have our vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's an illegal alien, someone who's a felon not eligible to vote, someone who doesn't exist. If they vote, they cancel your vote out as much as if you're prevented from voting.
If this is going to be fixed, it's going to have to be a citizen effort. It comes down to, it's the same old question, if not now, when? If not us, then who?
This is huge. This is about the democracy and the principles of the United States of America. People say, but why you? Why you? Why? Well, why not? And if it starts with a fireman, if it starts with a sanitation worker, if it starts with a teacher or a nurse or a caretaker of the elderly, then so be it. It's got to start somewhere. But it's time we come together and fix this problem once and for all.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
Serious allegations of voter fraud, the claims raising questions about the
Commerce Secretary Ron Brown and 32 others were on a military plane that crashed today in a violent storm. There are no known survivors at this time.
The U.S. Army was funded by the evil entity.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
The process is rigged.
People die and fall for the right to vote. It's it's too late.
So it's incredibly important now that we draw a line and say, not on our watch.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
Doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
Together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
Once again, from the Conservative Political Action Conference outside of Washington, D.C., this is a very special edition of the Conservative Commandos radio show. My co-host Sharon Engel has got our next guest with us.
I certainly do. We have Jason Johnson with us. He's the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, LELDF, and he's here at CPAC. We want to talk to you about the prosecution of law enforcement officers in places like Colorado, Tennessee, and Utah. Prosecution of law enforcement officers. That's like an oxymoron to me, Jason. I don't get that. So fill us in here.
Yeah, so first of all, Sharon, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you. The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, the reason we exist, our mission is twofold. So first of all, and primarily, is that we raise money and contribute to money to the defense of law enforcement officers who have been charged with, believe it or not, crimes in connection with the performance of their duty. So if you think about sort of notorious cases like the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore and other similar cases around the country, where prosecutors are acting really based on their own political agenda and not so much on the law. And so when that happens, we are there to support those officers, help pay for their defense costs, help support them through the process. My organization, the LELDF, has been around since the mid-1990s doing just that. In terms of current cases, and you brought up a couple of them, we support Agent Andy O'Gwynn in Utah. He's our Utah parole and probation agent who was attacked by one of his probationers, who's actually a drug dealer, a gang member, and because Agent Withe had to discharge his weapon in the performance of his duties, he was later indicted and charged with a crime and is awaiting trial for that. We have other cases too in the country. We referenced a couple of them as well. And these are just examples. There certainly are others. 2 Boulder County, Colorado sheriff's deputies who were recently charged with manslaughter in connection with the death of a prisoner who was in the back of a transport wagon. Kind of makes you think about the Freddie Gray case from Baltimore from a few years ago. They've both been charged with manslaughter. There was no force at all used on the young man who was in the back of the transport wagon. He actually had a fatal or near fatal dose of alcohol or methamphetamines. I think the third case you referenced was in Nashville, Tennessee, where a young police officer, Andrew Delpy, stands charged with first-degree murder because he was involved in a police-involved shooting incident with an armed person. So a lot of times in the mainstream media we hear about cases where police officers have been alleged to shoot unarmed individuals. That's not the case here at all. This was a person who was armed with a fully functioning firearm, who was a convicted felon, who was trying to flee from law enforcement. Officer Delkey found it necessary to shoot that individual, and notwithstanding all of that, he stands charged with first-degree murder in the city of Nashville, Tennessee. So those are the kinds of cases that we are on the lookout for throughout the country, and we stand prepared to help assist with their defense.
Wow. Now I thought that police officers had their own union and they took care of their own, within the department, so there wasn't really a need for someone like LELDF. And yet I know that these are costly prosecutions when they happen. So tell me, do you work with the union, or the union bows out and says, no, we don't want to defend our officers, they got themselves caught in this political thing and we don't want to be there? Tell me about that.
It's really all the above.
Really?
So there are, as you know, states in the country where unions are not really unions. They're not really bargaining agents. And so sometimes the police officers don't even have a union at all. And so in that case, the LELDF or the officers' personal resources, or maybe funds that they can raise on their own, are really the only resource for them to turn to. But even in cases where the police officers do have a union, even well-funded unions, sometimes the defense costs are just too much for them to bear, and they're not able to carry all the defense costs. Our real goal is really just so that the law enforcement officer themselves and their family don't have to cover these costs. As you know, they can be devastating. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in the typical case.
And when you defend these officers now, how do they go back to work? After you've been charged with something like this, how do you get your good name back? That's all. I mean, that's really dear to my heart. I mean, after the Harry Reid incident in 2010, I'm still struggling to get my good name back. And I can't imagine how it is for an officer who's been accused. His name has just been put out there. He's been branded by the press as the bad guy in this thing, and he gets exonerated. Does he have to have a new career? How does he get his life back?
Well, sometimes they do, unfortunately. If you think about the case involving the death of Michael Brown back in 2014 in Ferguson, Missouri, that police officer actually was never charged with anything. He was actually cleared by a local investigation and by a federal investigation. But even though he was cleared, his career was over because he simply could not perform as a police officer in the town of Ferguson or really anywhere else. So, as you point out, these things have collateral effects, even in cases where they're not charged. So in situations where they are charged, oftentimes it is career ending, just because it's the officer just doesn't have the ability to function, or the agency, the jurisdiction where the officer works, really just can't, as a political matter, can't withstand having the officer back. So sometimes their career is over, even if they get cleared.
Well, and they become a target too, I would think. Everybody knows your name, your face, and now you're a target for anyone who's, it's kind of like, I don't know, old gunslinger stuff where, you go and try and get the guy that has the most notches on his gun or something. I don't know. It just seems like they're just a real target. So how do you help them with that rehabilitation? Because, I know guys that go into law enforcement, that's all they've ever wanted to do. This is their career. They plan to retire, and all of a sudden the thing is upset by they just were the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place.
Yeah, well, we will, our commitment to the officers who we support is to help in any way that we can. So sometimes that's just paying defense costs because those are so, those are really unaffordable for most police officers. But some officers need support as they get through the process. Some officers may need some help to get back on their feet. And there's no one-size-fits-all. We're willing to help out wherever we can. We recognize that not every action taken by a police officer is correct. We don't accept every single case that comes to us or that we find. We look for cases that are really aggravated, where it's really an injustice that's being done. And in those cases, we're willing to do anything we can to help those officers.
Now, we talked a little bit about the collateral damage for the officer themselves, but many of these officers have family, children, wives. How does, I can't imagine how this would affect their home life. Do they have to relocate? I mean, what happens to families and all of this?
Well, it really just depends. It just depends on the circumstances. It depends on the locality, whether we're talking about a small town or a big city. But the trauma that the officers who we support as they're going through this process is trauma that's shared by their family, by children, by spouses. And we hope to support them as well and give them what they need. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, this affects the officers, not only their potential loss of freedom, but also their livelihood. And in some cases, everything they've ever known how to do. So it has major implications, not only for the officer, but for their family.
Well, thank you so much, Jason Johnson, for putting a human face on these officers. Sometimes, we just see the uniform. We don't think about the man, the family, the career behind that uniform. And really, that's what you're talking about at LELDF, is you're defending that whole unit, that whole family unit. You're trying to come in there and take some of the damage that's being done by these political cases. We need to get going, but I want you to tell us how our listeners can follow you, how we can help you with this, because if there's anybody that are pro-first responders, it's us here at Conservative Commandos.
Yeah. Well, I'd love it if your listeners would check out our website. It's policedefense.org. It has a lot of information on our website about what we do, who we support, past officers we've supported, who we're supporting now, and who we'll support in the future. And then you can also follow me on Twitter. It's at LELDF_president.
There one other thing. I want you to make an appeal now to our audience.
Okay.
What is the appeal? What would you say to them to make them say, I got to help Jason and his group?
Well, if they visit our website and learn more about what we do, we'd love it if they would be willing to make a donation to help support the officers that we support our organization. But also just remember that facts matter. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't rush to judgment in cases that affect, and really in any case, but certainly in cases involving high-profile law enforcement action. And also don't buy into, and tell other people not to buy into, some of the narratives that come out. So you think about the hands up, don't shoot narrative that turned out to not be true. Don't jump on those. Hang back, wait till the facts come out, and then make an assessment of whether you think the action was proper or not.
Thank you so much, Jason Johnson, for being our guest here on Conservative Commandos Radio Show.
It's good to be with you.
Well, we're so grateful you were here. God bless you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching us here at CPAC, Conservative Commandos Radio Show. I'm here with Jason Johnson. It is, once more, Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, LELDF, and we're talking to you from CPAC. I'm Sharon Engel, and my guest is Jason Johnson.
Have you been leasing a property for your business or renting storage space? Are you tired of paying rent year after year? Call the experts at General Steel to own a building at up to 30% off now.
I'd been renting a building and paying someone else's mortgage, but General Steel showed me how I could own a space tailored to the needs of my business and for less than renting.
Call General Steel now at the number on your screen for our current building specials and to price your metal building system today.
My building's the dream I've had since finishing my house 14 years ago. I've been using it for a garage, workshop, and storage area for my tools and equipment, and I can't believe how great it turned out.
The economy is improving and the price of steel is expected to rise. Stop waiting. It could cost you thousands. Call General Steel now to see how you can own for less than you thought. Stop waiting to start your business or expand your operation. Call General Steel now.
Call 877-484-7002.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business, according to The Secret War, a shocking new research report. I just read it. And folks, I was amazed to learn why banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get The Secret War free. Just call the number on the screen, no charge, from the folks at Swiss America. And get this, did you know simply spending cash today may be enough to have you branded as a potential criminal? That's right. The new war on cash is really a war against all freedom-loving Americans. The Secret War is yours free, so call the number on the screen and you can tell them Pat Boone gave you the number.
We're back at CPAC, Conservative Political Action Committee, and we are here for Conservative Commando Radio Network and TV Network, AUN in Northern California, and on stick radio around the country in 8 different states. And today, I've got a lot of really great guests, but the best guest, the one who I've been looking forward to talk to most, is John Miller. John's with Blaze TV, and John gets to cover the president at the White House, which has got to be just amazing. John, tell me a little bit about what that's like. What's it like to be in the White House covering the president?
By the way, I have to imagine you say that to everyone. You're the guest you're looking most forward to. Just a hunch. It's fascinating to actually be there. I mean, we're in a news cycle where it's not just every day there's something new. If you go to the bathroom, you're missing a huge story. So it's certainly exciting. It's certainly nonstop. It's certainly stressful at times. I was just saying before we actually went on air with the interview, the president's is coming back from Hanoi, Vietnam. And this is actually a time where reporters can actually get stuff done and can actually report on stuff, because so much of the day is consumed with just trying to scream questions and trying to get stuff in and trying to get noticed and all that kind of stuff. So, when the president leaves town, it's actually a nice opportunity to kind of focus on things and kind of, get more investigative work out there. So, so it's nice to get away from the crazy scrum that is the White House press pool and White House press room and all of that.
Well, that's one of the questions I've always had, and just from an insider perspective, and I think a lot of America would like to know how it actually works. And, we see Jim Acosta basically making an ass of himself and trying to elevate himself to so he can sell a book or get a TV show or something. But most people who are in that press room are working hard trying to report the news for the American people. How does that actually work on the day-to-day basis?
The way it works is that Jim has gotten himself in a position, he might be making an idiot of himself, but it's working for him because there is no story. He's not going to report anything good that the president is doing. So he makes himself the story and then makes the attacks on him part of the negative story. So he creates these negative stories about the president for himself. For the rest of the people working in the room, it's kind of just they're doing their job. I mean, a lot of them are, I will say this, a lot of them are of the same mentality as Jim, and he just kind of does it better than them, to be quite honest. But a lot of them want to be noticed. A lot of them want to just kind of...
There's an ego.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And remember, over a year ago, I don't know if you remember, the cameras were shut off, and the reporters, they had a fit because the whole thing for them is standing up and, this big performance art thing. So it's, there are a few reporters in the room where that's not the job for them. And you got to respect those people. But really the insider's perspective is that the part I most resent about it is that there is this kind of insiders club mentality. And you wonder how you get all the same stories coming out of the White House. And it is because they all kind of talk to each other. They kind of all say, what's the biggest story? And then they all report on the stories the same exact way.
Right.
And so everyone's reporting the exact same thing. So I mean, what we do it a little bit differently is we kind of try to look at, what is the story that not everyone's talking about? And more importantly, what are the stories that actually affect the American people?
Right.
Because, it's nice that, staff shakeup, this random staffer that nobody's ever heard about who, puts papers, in the shelf, that person got canned. That's the story that the White House press corps wants to focus on. But that doesn't actually affect everyday Americans. Economy does, jobs do, regulations do, all that stuff. So, those are the stories that we like to focus on and how the policies coming out of the White House actually affect the average American at home.
So typically, what America knows is we have, stand up, Sarah Sanders gets in front of you, and maybe brings some experts in, or she just does a Q&A back and forth. And that tends to be what drives the news cycle, at least on television. But there's a lot of other work that goes into getting other stories out of the White House, because there's 1,000 things being done there every day, and every one's of interest to somebody. So how do you determine what you're going to report on, and what matters, and what you think matters? And because that editorial process is probably the most important editorial process,
Sure.
because there's a limited number of minutes on the air.
Sure. And, a lot of times people think that the big story is always going to be at the White House. A lot of times the biggest White House story is not actually within the campus of the White House. You go either to the Capitol, or even we just talked to, angel moms. You go talk to people who have lost their kids to illegal immigration, who are close with the president, who have been kind of informing these policies and kind of influencing these policies and seeing how these policies affect them. A lot of times the big story is not going to be, at the White House. That's the story that everyone's going to be talking about, which, you don't want to report on the exact same thing, especially if you don't have an interesting angle. So a lot of times the story is not where you think it is, and a lot of times it's something little. A few months ago, I don't know if you remember, the president signed pictures of the angel moms, their deceased kids, and USA Today, a lot of mainstream media outlets made this big deal about it. They said, the president's terrible, how dare, it's so gosh for him to sign their faces. Turned out no one reached out to the angel moms to ask them, did you want this? It turns out they said, yes, the president, we wanted him. We asked him specifically in the Oval Office to do that. And that was a little story that actually ended up getting huge. The president retweeted it just because it was a little nugget that wasn't being reported on, that was actually being reported on incorrectly, that, just needed a little bit of light shed on it and some truth shed on it. So a lot of times the story is really small, but can actually be a bigger deal.
And what that shows is that, every reporter has bias. Every reporter has a point of view. The question is, are you going to try to get the truth?
Right.
Or are you going to try to just write what your point of view, what your hot take is? And in today's internet world and Twitter world, hot takes matter. Truth, that gets lost in the wayside a little bit.
I mean, it's incredible with Twitter. It's terrible, but if it's an incorrect thing, often it will do so much better on Twitter than the truth, and it's a little discouraging. I, as a White House reporter, wear my bias on my sleeve. I think that that's more honest with my viewers and readers, just because Jim Acosta is not an objective reporter.
Right.
April Ryan is not an objective reporter, and they all claim they are. So I think it's a more honest relationship with people who are consuming your content. If you just tell them, hey, here's where I'm coming from. I'm always going to be with the facts. I'm going to stick to the facts, and the facts are always going to be at the center of what I do. But I'm not going to tell you I'm objective and don't have opinions on this, because opinions seep through, whether it's your word choice or whether it's what you choose to omit from a story. All of that stuff is obviously informed by your worldview. So just acknowledge it, and then people can know where you're coming from.
That's why one of the questions I always have is the selection of who gets to be in the White House press corps. It seems like the sort of static White House press corps, where there's the mainstream media has 9 out of 10 seats at the table, actually is a disservice to the public, because you're not getting a disparate point of view, whether it's from the far left or from the far right or from mainstream publication like
Sure.
The Blaze.
Well, here's the thing, is that we have a White House which is very friendly to smaller outlets like The Blaze, and they're letting other outlets in there, but the White House press corps is still controlled by the White House Press Association. White House Correspondents Association,
right.
And they are the ones, and they're still very much a very heavily liberal-leaning organization. So they're the ones who get to decide who's in the pool. They're the ones who get to decide who sits where in the room. That's why the front row is still CNN, NBC, ABC, New York Times, Washington Post. So they still control very much who covers the White House and how. So we've gotten our foot in there. We've kind of broken through a little bit, but it's still difficult because there's still an old club that controls.
And my point has always been, nobody tells, they might control where people sit, but they don't control who gets called on.
Right.
And that's the one place where the White House has some control. John, I really appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Absolutely.
And informing people a little bit about how it works on the inside. How can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MillerStream, and we also just released a new podcast of my show. It's White House Brief is the name of it. White House Brief. You can search it in iTunes or Omni or Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. White House Brief. Search it and subscribe to it.
White House Brief. I'm going to be checking it out. I hope all of our listeners do. Thank you very much for joining us. We're from the Conservative Commandos. I'm Rick Manning, and I just appreciate you all watching us today from CPAC. And we will be now moving on to the next segment.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is, there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1, and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to BuyYourTimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. BuyYourTimeshare.com. That's BuyYourTimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to healthcare or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
Once again, this is a very special edition of the Conservative Commandos radio show, coming to you from CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. Today, my co-host is Sharon Angle, and Sharon, the honor of introducing our next guest is yours.
It is an honor for me to introduce Clint Brown, who's a legal policy director. Clint leads the legal policy team that engages with policymakers in the political branches at the state and federal level to advance PLF's mission of constitutionally limited government and individual liberty. And he's with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Welcome to Conservative Commandos radio show here at CPAC.
Thanks so much for having me, Sharon.
Well, it's great to have you. You know, you come right out of California. Their Pacific Legal Foundation has been around for a long time. In fact, I had some dealings with them way back when I was a legislator, so I know you do good work when legislators need a little help fighting in their own legislature. It's really amazing. We were sued by our governor. That's how come I called you. So,
sure.
So we know about these things, and you've got an interesting project that you're working on here at CPAC. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. We do have an interesting project. We have a case, a First Amendment case out of Texas that I think your viewers will find very interesting, and your listeners. We had a client go into the polling place on Election Day wearing a MAGA hat. In 2018, Trump was not on the ballot, and the election workers told him he had to leave. They even threatened to call the police. We think that's a violation of his First Amendment rights, so we're taking steps to defend him. We also have another client on this case. Her husband's a firefighter based in Houston. In Houston, there was an initiative on the ballot to give firefighters a raise. She walks in wearing a Houston Firefighters t-shirt, didn't think anything of it. They make her turn her shirt inside out in order to vote because they considered that political speech. They considered that campaigning within the polling place.
Now, Trump wasn't on the ballot.
Right, Trump was not on the ballot.
So how can that be campaigning if he's not on the ballot? What was their rationale for that?
That is a great question. They took it to mean he was out there campaigning for Republicans, and they saw that as a no-no, and they drew kind of an arbitrary line. What's interesting, though, is Pacific Legal Foundation, we do litigation. Last year, we had a case that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in our favor. We had some Tea Party patriots wearing T-shirts, very similar, in Minnesota, and they were kicked out of the polling place, too. So the Supreme Court ruled that is a restriction on their free speech. That is not allowed, and yet Texas is continuing to do it. And they did it to our clients. So we found that very concerning, that they're not following the latest Supreme Court precedent.
Well, and it seems like that law that restricts what you can do in the polling place and electioneering in the polling place is fairly narrow. It has to have something to do with someone who's on the ballot or asking for their vote right there within 100 feet of the polling place. That's my understanding. As a candidate, we said you can't do that. And of course, if I'm on the ballot, you can't wear your Sharon Angle t-shirt that says Vote Sharon Angle on it. I kind of get that, but maybe I'm even making that more narrow than it really is.
You know, that's a common misunderstanding about this. We think that you're allowed to wear that if Sharon Angle is on the ballot, that Sharon Angle t-shirt. We think that is passive speech. And it is still political speech, which is sacred, but it's not going in there with a megaphone, beating a drum, saying, vote for Sharon Angle, vote for Donald Trump. It's not doing that. And by the way, if the clients had been wearing an I'm With Her t-shirt, a Bernie Bro t-shirt, any of those things, the same principle would apply. It would be wrong for them to restrict that political speech.
Now, I have a friend who works on the Election Integrity Project in California, and when she trains her volunteers, she says that even a picture of the president on the wall in a polling place is electioneering because he's a candidate. Would that be true then? Because she said that, and that's your state. So I know election law is different in every state. Does California have a more narrow definition than most other states, or?
That is a good question too. I don't know that California necessarily has a more narrow definition. If that definition is more narrow and it doesn't comply with the Supreme Court case last year, then it's invalid. So that is something important to look into. One thing that I found interesting that I think your listeners and viewers will find interesting too is last year when we had this case, Justice Alito, a good conservative judge, started a line of questioning where he asked whether certain types of shirts, certain types of clothing would violate this rule. And so he started with, well, what about an NRA t-shirt? And the opposing counsel said, yes, that would certainly violate the rule. What about a shirt that says, Parkland Strong? Well, that's a little less clear, because Parkland Strong can mean a lot of things. So where do you draw that line? And so Justice Alito's line of questioning on that was very good, and I think that is the kind of question that we should be asking. Picture of the president on the wall. Does that comply with this? It shouldn't be arbitrary election judges deciding that decision, that issue.
Well, and we've had blatant cases of electioneering where the candidate was within 100 feet of the polling place and he was passing out his brochures and nothing happened. I mean, they didn't even ask him to leave. They didn't even say, you can't be doing that here. So it seems like there's an arbitrary application as well of the law.
Right, and when it comes to our First Amendment rights, free speech, there should be no arbitrary application. It shouldn't be a different judgment for one person than another. It should apply equally to everyone, and it should not be abridged, your right to free speech. So, I don't know, I think they're on tough ground here to make that case.
Now, you're expecting this to go on, you're going to the Supreme Court if they agree to hear your case, or?
This case is
particular
not
one
before
in-
the Supreme Court yet. Last year we had the case before the Supreme Court. They already decided on this issue. This is a case we've just filed at the lowest court level, and we're really working to clarify this precedent in the courts. So we're starting, at the bottom and working our way up if we have to.
Well, and in some regards, you want it to go all the way to the Supreme Court, don't you?
That's what we do, yes. A lot of times when we have a case that lower courts don't decide correctly, maybe they go to the Ninth Circuit in California, something like that, we think the Supreme Court should decide. And so if we can take cases to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, we've taken 14 cases to the Supreme Court, several of those within the last few years, and we've had 11 wins, if we can take it all the way and clarify precedent for the entire country, I think that's what we should do.
Now, I have to just ask you this about the Covenant Christian school kids, I guess it was Covenant Catholic School.
Right,
They were in their mega hats, and all of a sudden there's this firestorm across the country. Would you take on their case? I mean,
if the government had restricted their speech in that case, I'm sure we would talk to them about it, because that's what we do. We take on when the government tries to restrict someone's speech. We take that on. I think they're represented by someone in a libel case where they were disparaged by a lot of media organizations,
right,
who just jumped on the issue and didn't take a second to look at the facts, which is a whole nother can of worms.
Well, and I asked that question so we could clarify. You're very specific in the cases that you take on. You don't just say, oh, well, that's a free speech case, we're going to go and grab that.
Right, yes, that is exactly right. What we do is we find cases that we think would set a precedent. Of course, we're not trying to legislate through the courts or anything like that. We don't approve of activist judges, that kind of thing. When the law is being interpreted incorrectly, we want to make sure the courts clarify that. That's their duty. So we find those cases and we ask them to clarify.
We've been talking with Clint Brown, who's with the Pacific Legal Foundation, and he is a constitutionalist. Is that a correct way to?
Absolutely. I love the Constitution.
and we love the Constitution here on Conservative Commandos radio show, and so do our listeners. I want you to tell our listeners how they can follow you, how they can get in touch with your cases, how they can know about what Pacific Legal does, but more importantly, if they need you, how that could happen for them.
Definitely. If anybody needs us, I would love for them to reach out. We're on pacificlegal.org. They can keep up with our cases on Twitter and Facebook. We also have some good YouTube content out there, some cool videos, that kind of thing that people might find interesting, even on this issue.
Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, Clint Brown from Pacific Legal Foundation. I'm so glad you were here as our guest. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
God bless you. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in here to watch us here at CPAC. I'm Sharon Engel with my guest, Clint Brown from the Pacific Legal Foundation. We're coming to you from CPAC, and we'll be right back with another guest.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes. Now, people say, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Well, they were the ones doing it.
The integrity of one man, one vote doesn't apply at the Texas state legislature. There is no way to know if your representatives are voting for themselves.
Hartman, a Republican, reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England.
2 out of 3 voters nationwide believe that voter fraud is a serious problem in the U.S. today.
The process is rigged.
Both sides of the aisle are guilty.
Florida now has to tell the Department of Justice whether the state will comply with DOJ's demand to stop purging thousands of people from its voter rolls.
We have the sloppiest election system of any industrialized democracy.
Philadelphia flagged 50,000 duplicate registrations, so just think how many more slipped through.
It's almost impossible to detect. How do you get caught? You only get caught if you confess.
Election corruption is deeply embedded in America. Quote, election fraud is a crime that usually pays, unquote, writes Tracy Campbell in his book, Deliver the Vote, A History of Election Fraud, an American political tradition from 1742 to 2004. In 1742, the first Prime Minister of Britain in the American colonies, Robert Walpole, was forced to resign.
We have a right not to have our vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's an illegal alien, someone who's a felon not eligible to vote, someone who doesn't exist. If they vote, they cancel your vote out as much as if you're prevented from voting.
If this is going to be fixed, it's going to have to be a citizen effort. It comes down to, it's the same old question, if not now, when? If not us, then who?
This is huge. This is about the democracy and the principles of the United States of America. People say, but why you? Why you? Why not? And if it starts with a fireman, if it starts with a sanitation worker, if it starts with a teacher or a nurse or a caretaker of the elderly, then so be it. It's got to start somewhere. But it's time we come together and fix this problem once and for all.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
Serious allegations of voter fraud, the claims raising questions about the
Commerce Secretary Ron Brown and 32 others were on a military plane that crashed today in a violent storm. There are no known survivors at this time.
The U.S. Army was funded by the evil entity.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
The process is rigged.
People died and fought for the right to vote. It's too late.
So it's incredibly important now that we draw a line and say, not on our watch.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
Doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
Hi, it's Rick Manning from Conservative Political Action Committee. Here we are at Washington, in the Washington National Harbor facility, a beautiful facility overlooking the Potomac River and the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and you can see the Masonic Temple across the river over in Virginia. So we're sitting in Maryland, a strange place to be talking about freedom, but nonetheless, that's where we are. I'm here today with a good friend, Jim Simpson. Jim is one of the true, real unsung heroes in the battle for freedom in this country, and really telling it like it is about some of the challenges that we have. Today, he was on a panel with the Center for Security Policy on anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism and what that means here in America. And so I wanted to bring Jim on so he can kind of just let you know what people here at CPAC learned from that panel. Jim, thank you for joining me.
Thanks
what exactly, we do have a rise in anti-Semitism.
Sure do.
What's going on? Talk to me about it.
Well, you know, it's all just another dimension of the left's agenda to discredit America and American allies. It's just pretty much that simple, except with Israel and the Jewish people, you have the added twist of the horrible history of anti-Semitism going back for thousands of years, and then, of course, during the Holocaust at the very worst. So we have, for a long time, been a very supportive country of Israel, but the left never has been. Israel is one of our staunchest allies, and the left wants to see it destroyed, primarily for that reason. Now, the left has worked for decades in collusion with the Islamists, and I'm not talking about your average everyday Muslim. I'm talking about the vast majority of Muslim organizations in this country, which are almost all Muslim Brotherhood groups. And, you know, we've been trying to get them designated as a terrorist group. It's difficult because they don't actually, at least not directly, practice terrorism in this country. What they practice here is subversion. And I'd like to see that definition expanded because it's every bit as dangerous, because we know in the end, when the subversives win, the terrorism will come next. So it's not like that's out of the question, but here they're practicing what we call civilization jihad. And the anti-Semitism, the growing anti-Semitism in this country is just a big dimension of that. And you know, the left and the Islamists working together now use the same tactics, and they use the same tactics with everything. First they find a straw man, and then they destroy the straw man. And in this case, the straw man is Zionism is racism. Zionism is nothing more than the Jews' legitimate desire for a homeland. And they're like every other group that ever wanted a homeland, you know.
And let's be clear.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Coming out of Israel exists because coming out of World War II,
Yep.
we had the remainder of the Jews that hadn't been killed by the Nazis, and they rightfully said, never again are we going to be dependent upon other nations to house us. And Great Britain, which controlled the area that Israel's in at the time, opened the doors to what is now Israel for the Jewish people to go back. And quite honestly, it was virtually uninhabited at the time.
Right.
And so the Jewish people from Europe came to Israel, to the Promised Land, and refounded the historic Israel there.
Yep.
And then the countries around basically attacked the Jewish people who were there, and in a short war, the Jewish people wanted to establish their country.
That's right.
The irony is that the people who were supposedly displaced, the other countries didn't allow them to reintegrate. Jordan didn't allow them to reintegrate. What they did is they put them into camps.
Well.
And that's how come we have these Palestinian camps that are still refugee camps 50, 60, 70 years later.
And there's another aspect to that that rarely gets mentioned. When the Arabs invaded Israel, they were assuming, with good reason, frankly, that they were going to just wipe the Israelis right out. So they wisely told the Arabs living there, get out, because it's going to be dangerous. There's going to be a lot of shooting.
Right.
And when we're done wiping them off the map, you can come back in. So it was never an issue that the Palestinians, and even that name is incorrect, were driven out of Israel. They left primarily of their own volition because the Arabs told them that we're going to win and then you can come back, but for now it's safer if you leave. And it didn't turn out that way, unfortunately for them.
One of the things that always astonishes me is anybody who's at all biblically literate knows that about the historical context to the Holy Land and the strife between the people who were there, the Philistines and the various ites that were there, and the Jewish people. I mean, ultimately, we have a 3,000-year history of the Jews in Jerusalem. And the most amazing part that I've seen in my lifetime is this President of the United States declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel and reestablishing Jerusalem and recognizing Jerusalem for what it is.
It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. You know, he is setting an example for all others, future ones, and the ones who already came to see, because he's a man of his word. He keeps his word, at least when he's allowed to, when he hasn't been obstructed by the left. And this is one beautiful example, because every president for the last, 20 years has promised that, and none of them have made good on it.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, so the left creates this Zionism is racism thing. Now, that's absolutely false, but then what they do next is they say the Zionist state is an apartheid state, which raises the specter of this evil South Africa that was separatist and racist. And then they go further and say, well, since it's an evil apartheid state, we're entitled to destroy it through BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, because we can't beat them militarily. So we'll go after them economically, and we'll get the whole world to engage in destroying this racist apartheid government. But the fact of the matter is, as you know, the left always turns the truth right on its head. The Israelis, Arabs living in Israel, enjoy freedoms they unknown in Palestinian areas. There are Arab generals, there are Arab members of the Knesset, there are Arabs on courts, and there's a very strong affirmative action program to make sure Arabs aren't discriminated against in the workplace. Conversely, if you're a Palestinian living in a Palestinian territory and you sell your land to a Jew, you can spend the rest of your life in prison. Jews are absolutely not welcome. The Palestinians live in oppressive, socialist, corrupt government. You know, back in the early 2000s, when I wrote an article about Yasser Arafat, I stumbled on this survey of Palestinians living in Israel. 70% said that if they were forced to go live in Palestinian-controlled areas, they take up arms.
Wow. One of the things, we've got about a minute and a half left here, so I really want to focus in on the rise of anti-Semitism in America, because it scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
In 15, 20 seconds, talk to me about where are we seeing it and what's being done. I know it's a big question.
We're seeing it, a lot of it on college campuses, because the Muslim Students Association, the largest Muslim brotherhood and oldest in the United States, has very much provoked anti-Semitism on campus. And because so much of the left, especially the young left, have bought whole hog through the indoctrination they get in college into the whole left's narrative, that they jump right on board, and they're perfectly happy to be the most vicious anti-Semites in the world because they're promoting leftism.
Well, there you have it. I'm Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government and Conservative Commando, here from CPAC with Jim Simpson. You can find us at CCRS TV or CCRSshow.com, and we look forward to the next segment. Thank you for joining me, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Have you been leasing a property for your business or renting storage space? Are you tired of paying rent year after year? Call the experts at General Steel to own a building at up to 30% off now.
I'd been renting a building and paying someone else's mortgage, but General Steel showed me how I could own a space tailored to the needs of my business and for less than renting.
Call General Steel now at the number on your screen for our current building specials. and to price your metal building system today.
My building's the dream I've had since finishing my house 14 years ago. I've been using it for a garage, workshop, and storage area for my tools and equipment, and I can't believe how great it turned out.
The economy is improving and the price of steel is expected to rise. Stop waiting. It could cost you thousands. Call General Steel now to see how you can own for less than you thought. Stop waiting to start your business or expand your operation. Call General Steel now.
Call 877-484-7002.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business, according to The Secret War, a shocking new research report. I just read it. And folks, I was amazed to learn why banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get The Secret War free. Just call the number on the screen, no charge, from the folks at Swiss America, and get this. Did you know simply spending cash today may be enough to have you branded as a potential criminal? That's right. The new war on cash is really a war against all freedom-loving Americans. The Secret War is yours free, so call the number on the screen and you can tell them Pat Boone gave you the number.
This is J.D. Manier with the Concerted Commandos radio show at CPAC 2019, National Harbor, and we are with Aaron, and his name is Aaron Withe, with the Freedom Foundation from Oregon. Good to have you on the show, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Good pleasure to be here.
You do a lot of politicking to get people out of union status.
Yes.
And I want you to talk about that to our audience because it gives people a lot of hope.
Yeah, sure. So what we do at the Freedom Foundation is we fight to remove government unions' influence from politics. And the way that we do that is we're utilizing a U.S. Supreme Court decision in Janus that gives all public employees the right to stop paying union dues and not be union members. However, the unions and the states are certainly not telling them that information. So we run a full-scale campaign to tell all public employees that they can leave their union, stop paying union dues, and we do that through going to their doors, going to their offices. We do a social media campaign, we send mailers, emails, just about any way that you can think of to tell these employees that they can leave their union. We're out there doing it.
Well, you kind of are Paul Revere's telling people you're free at last. And that's awesome. Now, Janus, I think, was about 8 months ago decided. Give us some statistics. Tell me how it's been going out on the West Coast.
Yeah, sure. We've seen significant fallout on the West Coast, especially where we've been running this campaign. In Oregon, we've seen 26% of state employees leave their union. 31% of classified school employees have left their union also, and we've helped 45,000 people across the West Coast in leaving their union. So we've really seen significant fallout in states where we're running this campaign.
That is truly awesome. You're talking some big dollars, aren't you?
Oh yeah, significantly. These people are paying $800 to $1,000 a year in union dues. So when they're opting out, every single one of these is taking that money away from the unions and their political agenda, which they would have otherwise been using it for. The West Coast is one of the largest exporters of government unions funds to the national unions, which by extension give to presidential candidates and candidates in other states as well, where they feel their funding is necessary. So the work we're doing on the West Coast really has national implications as well.
What kind of blowback have you received from the unions?
Man, yeah, when you fight the big dog, you have to be prepared to be attacked, and they do it in a multitude of ways. Frivolous lawsuits they file against us. In blue states like Oregon, Washington, and California, they can introduce and pass whatever legislation they like, and we've seen crazy legislation. This last session in Oregon, the current session in Oregon, we've seen a bill that would introduce government union funds, so the state funds would go to a fund that goes straight to the union rather than through public employees' paychecks. So everybody that's opted out of their union would see a pay cut if this were to pass, and this money would go into another state fund to go straight to the union. And of course, the personal attacks that the union do as well. They attack me, other executive staff, and our board at the Freedom Foundation. But all of this is a mark of success. If the unions aren't there attacking us, then we're probably not being successful.
Now, if you had to litigate against these unbelievable, crazy laws?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, the unions are not allowing people to leave. They've set up windows so people can't leave the unions. They try and opt out, these public employees do, and the unions deny them and say you can't opt out until a certain period of the year. We have to litigate over that. We have to litigate on a bunch of different things just to get people out of the union. And then, of course, they're firing back lawsuits either themselves or they're using the attorney generals in the states that they operate in to sue us also. So we're getting it on all angles.
Sounds like some of their crazy litigation, some of their crazy laws may be unconstitutional.
Oh yeah, of course they are, and they'll require legal challenges. If this bill passes, it's House Bill 2643 in Oregon. If that bill were to pass, we've put the unions and the state on notice to tell them we're going to sue the day that this is signed into law.
Amen, amen. Well, what about the positive side? What do people who are beneficiaries of your work, what do they say back?
Well, of course, I mean, they're public employees that wouldn't know that they could save this money. I mean, if I went up to you today and said, hey, you can give yourself an extra $1,100 in your paycheck, you'd be over the moon, right? And a lot of these people are. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the union's preventing some of these people from getting that money back, their hard-earned dollars that should never have been going to the union. So they're definitely well received when we're giving them our messages, and that's why we're getting such a significant portion of people opting out. And that's why we need to run this nationwide. I mean, people need to know across the nation that they have these rights and how to operate them. Because a lot of people, even if they do know, they don't know how to opt out, and if they're denied, they wouldn't know how to combat that, and they certainly couldn't afford the legal fees to be able to do it. So we're happy to give people this information and also to represent them as well.
Speaking of information, give us some contact, website and that kind of thing, Twitter accounts, whatever, because I do think our listeners are going to be very interested, and we have a number of them. They're on covering about 15 million people on the West Coast with 7 television stations. Oh, wow. So by all means, tell us how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. So we have 2 websites. One of them is for public employees, and if you know a public employee, you should send them to the website. It's optouttoday.com, and it has all the information you could possibly need if you're a public employee and wanting out of your union. And then our main website is freedomfoundation.com. Sign up to our email threads, learn more about what we're doing. We have new stuff coming out every week. We're in over 50. We have over 50 ongoing lawsuits against unions, so we have constant updates with our stuff.
We heard earlier today from Vice President Pence here in CPAC that the nomination process has been record-making. More conservative jurists in 2 years in the history of our republic. Any president. That has to help you. Because you're up against some crazy jurists out there. Talk a little bit about that, your Ninth Circuit.
Yeah, the Ninth Circuit is the Ninth Circus is what we call it. We cannot win litigation in there. Every time we file something, we're prepared to go to the U.S. Supreme Court because that's the only place we're going to be successful on the West Coast. But it's okay, because when you're in the U.S. Supreme Court, it has national implications as well. So we're really happy with President Trump and his nominees and what they've been able to do for the freedom movement.
Well, we have maybe another minute or so. In closing comments, what would you tell our listeners, how they can sign up, how they can join, but or anything at a higher level? Just speak it out.
Sure, we're a nonprofit. We're 501c3, so we're supported by people across the nation that believe in our mission. I'd encourage anybody listening to go on our website, donate to us. It's tax exempt, and we never disclose any of our donors either. So I'd encourage you to sign up for $25. It will get you a subscription to our Living Liberty magazine, which informs everybody monthly of our updates, and also sign up to our emails, share our Facebook posts, and do all that stuff, because this is a message we need to get across the nation.
That's pretty awesome. I'm going to do a little bio with you. You're a basketball player back in college, correct?
Yes, I was.
What college was that?
Small Christian school called Corbin University in Salem, Oregon.
Did you study law while you were in college?
No, I did not study law, no, but I run a team of attorneys, so I have a very good grasp on what we're doing legally at the Freedom Foundation. I tell my staff I'm not an attorney, but I know more than a lot of them.
That's excellent. That's a lot of fun. That's encouraging. Yeah. Well, what is anything, other aspects of the Freedom Foundation that will be related to this that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, our litigation branch, like I said, we have over 50 lawsuits, and it wouldn't be enough to share the exact extent of them, but I'll tell you that we're having big national implications with our litigation, and we have a really good team of attorneys. I mean, they focus on one thing, and it's suing government unions. There's not many other organizations that are so laser focused like ours, and all of our attorneys are focused on doing this one thing and doing it really well.
And that is truly awesome. And that's encouraging as all get out, that there is still hope for our republic. And if there was one thing you would want our listeners to know about your organization and truly how they could support, let us know.
Yeah, I certainly will. Like I said, we're a non-profit, so donating to us is certainly a good way, spreading the word. Like I said, we need to take this nationwide.
And we do. Bring it out east, bring it to the Midwest. Yes. We have a lot of unions still that dominate. Quick question, how are you doing with the teachers' unions?
Yeah, the teachers' unions, I mean, they have a monopoly on messaging. I mean, they've really done a job of focusing their messaging on their union members. It takes a lot of our efforts to go and tell people, tell teachers especially, that they can leave their union. But like I said, the message is so simple, you can save yourself $1,100 and lose nothing. When we get that message to people, they're opting out in waves.
One more time, Aaron, how can our listeners support you?
Please go to thefreedomfoundation.com, click the donate button, click on the email sign up button. We'd love to see some more feedback from your listeners.
Aaron Withe with the Freedom Foundation. God bless, Aaron.
Thank you so much.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is, there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1, and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to BuyYourTimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. BuyYourTimeshare.com. That's BuyYourTimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
Hello and welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show here, broadcasting live from CPAC 2019. If you hear the noise in the background, that's just all the buzz that's going around here. I happen to be one of your hosts here. My name is Dr. Nasser Sheikh, and with us we have our guest, Mr. Dan Gainor. He is the Vice President of Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. He heads up both the MRC Business and the Culture departments, including their popular Source project. He's a veteran editor with more than 3 decades of experience. He's been on all the shows, Fox News, CNN, CBS, NBC, all the shows that you know about, Blaze TV, and he's also has a regular spot on One America News Network. Mr. Gainor, welcome to Conservative Commandos radio show.
The best part of the CPAC is always seeing the people you know in person. So it's always good to be on with Conservative Commandos in person.
Great. Well, listen, before we got on here, I was going to ask you what was the subject that you felt that you wanted to discuss. So you said something about online censorship.
Oh, well, that's because more than, I guess about 2 years ago now, I was really harassing my boss, Brent Bozell, that this would become a growing problem. And he did what he always does and assigned then the extra work to me. And we came out with a big project, big report last year pegged to the congressional hearings about censorship. And we launched our censorship project, and now it's called MRC Tech Watch. And I'm in charge of that. And what we do, we monitor the Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, pretty much the way we monitor ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN. And what we do, we look for biases. So just this week, we came out with a piece talking about 113 prominent conservatives or people who are willing to say the apolitical things that get you in trouble on Twitter that have been banned, suspended, somehow restricted in their speech because of that. And that includes even a Canadian liberal academic who got in trouble and got suspended and then banned from Twitter for daring to say men are not women.
Well, you know, we've heard this so often that now they're hiding behind, that they're a platform of ideas, a platform of diversity, and we see that doesn't happen because, just as you mentioned, you take a look at the seconds, the minutes, the hours of tape roll that are out there for people, for example, like on Twitter and Facebook. And if a conservative makes those comments, immediately they're censored, they're banned, they can't go on their devices for 3 to 4 days. Why is that not happening on to the liberals? I mean, what are you looking in that respect?
Well, foundationally, these are liberal companies created in Silicon Valley, hiring liberals that created extremely aggressive liberal policies about so-called hate speech. They're vague, they're massive, they've been used to restrict almost anything, including ultimately at one point the Declaration of Independence. So there's some words in there I didn't like, Declaration of Independence. So I mean, that's, and I think it's very clear at some point they're going to be used against the Bible or Bible passages. And now it's really dawning on people how dangerous this is. At the time, it's going global. Now, they claim their platforms, but platforms would have not only the the advantages of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, but they would also not work in conjunction with governments. Well, Section 230 might be challenged about the way it's designed, whether it protects them or not, but Facebook is already working with France, the French government, about speech, and the head of the UN just came out and said they want to create a global regimen against hate speech. So that is no longer just, hey, these ordinary companies. That is now governments using this to restrict speech. Michelle Malkin just got a warning that she had violated Pakistani blasphemy laws on Twitter. I mean, that's the level of insanity that we've taken our First Amendment rights in this country, dumped them out online, and then these companies don't believe in them. They believe in safe spaces, not freedom.
Well, that's the thing. When I saw that myself, I was wondering, I said, here you are living within the boundaries of the United States of America. You're protected by the First Amendment. No other country's laws, sovereign or otherwise, should be able to be coming into the arena of these companies to basically say that you're violating the rights of another country. You may be insulting them, you may be not saying things that they don't like, but the whole idea of the First Amendment protection is that we've always said is that the reason is not because of my speech, but because it should protect your speech that I may not want to hear.
Well, I agree with that 100%. That used to be the policy of the American left. That was, I grew up with that policy. I grew up with the ACLU protecting, listen, no one likes that.
Where is the ACLU now?
They've given up. The ACLU believed in protecting even detestable Nazis. No one likes Nazis. Nazis are scum. Okay, but even the ACLU protected the idea that they could march in Skokie, Illinois, which was a community, Jewish community, had a lot of Holocaust survivors in it. If that's protected, you protect the worst speech so that you protect the other speech as well. Now, after Charlottesville, the ACLU, which protected Nazis and other people marching in Charlottesville, had an internal rebellion, and now they've backed off their traditional belief in the First Amendment. So that means the left no longer believes in the Second Amendment or pretty much any part of the First, because they don't believe in religious speech, free press for conservatives, assembly. They don't believe in any of it. And that is dangerous. Once we bow to the heckler's veto of our speech, we don't have freedom.
Well, you're true, and you know what? The left always loved to spout how they love diversity. They love diversity of people, diversity of food, diversity of culture, diversity of multiculturalism. You know what they don't like the diversity of? Diversity of thought.
Oh.
That's not in their playbook. When you start thinking for yourself, diversity, as far as the left is concerned, goes out the window.
Well, and that's the media just as bad. And the media believe in checkbox diversity. You're this category, you're this racial category, you're this religion, you're this sexual orientation or gender, whatever. But then you tell them, well, by the way, also you have to have opinions, different opinions, and they go, oh no, we don't. By having these other people with different opinions. No, you don't. You pick people who look differently than you and think just the same. And this is the problem with the American media. So, journalists hate it when you throw that back in their face. They're lousy at the first part of diversity. They underrepresent Hispanics, African Americans, women in leadership, etc., in journalism. And then you turn around and say, oh, by the way, you also have to consider conservatives. And they're like, no, we don't. It's because it's anathema to them. They think our opinions, the opinions of everybody here today, are just wrong, and they refuse to do it.
Well, we're here at CPAC 2019 speaking with our guest here, Mr. Dan Gainor, who is with the Media Research Center. And Dan, why don't you let everyone know, what are you working on now at MRC, and how can people sort of follow you, follow MRC and the work that you guys are doing there?
Oh, that's first of all, they should follow the MRC at newsbusters.org, and I write a weekly column. In fact, when CPAC is all done today, I'll be going back home and working on my worst of the week column for Fox, and that appears on foxnews.com on Sundays. And I also urge people to follow me on Twitter at Dan Gainor, DanGainor, and that's for full contact Twitter.
Okay, great. Well, there you have it. We're speaking with Dan Gainor, Vice President of Media Research Center. And we're going to take a break here to go to our sponsors, and we're going live here from CPAC 2019. Thanks so much.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes. Now, people say, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Well, they were the ones doing it.
The integrity of one man, one vote doesn't apply at the Texas state legislature. There is no way to know if your representatives are voting for themselves.
Department, a Republican reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England.
2 out of 3 voters nationwide believe that voter fraud is a serious problem in the U.S. today.
The process is rigged.
Both sides of the aisle are guilty.
Florida now has to tell the Department of Justice whether the state will comply with DOJ's demand to stop purging thousands of people from its voter rolls.
We have the sloppiest election system of any industrialized democracy.
Philadelphia flagged 50,000 duplicate registrations, so just think how many more slipped through.
It's almost impossible to detect. How do you get caught? You only get caught if you confess.
Election corruption is deeply embedded in America. Quote, election fraud is a crime that usually pays, unquote, writes Tracy Campbell in his book, Deliver the Vote, A History of Election Fraud, an American political tradition from 1742 to 2004. In 1742, the first Prime Minister of Britain in the American colonies, Robert Walpole, was forced to resign.
We have a right not to have our vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's an illegal alien, someone who's a felon not eligible to vote, someone who doesn't exist. If they vote, they cancel your vote out as much as if you're prevented from voting.
If this is going to be fixed, it's going to have to be a citizen effort. It comes down to, it's the same old question, if not now, when? If not us, then who?
This is huge. This is about the democracy and the principles of the United States of America. People say, but why you? Why you? Why? Well, why not? And if it starts with a fireman, if it starts with a sanitation worker, if it starts with a teacher or a nurse or a caretaker of the elderly, then so be it. It's got to start somewhere. But it's time we come together and fix this problem once and for all.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
Serious allegations of voter fraud, the claims raising questions about the
Commerce Secretary Ron Brown and 32 others were on a military plane that crashed today in a violent storm. There are no known survivors at this time.
The U.S. Army was funded by the evil entity.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
The process is rigged.
People die and fall for the right time. It's too late. So it's incredibly important now that we draw a line and say, not on our watch.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
So check this out. Google just finished its annual survey looking at how much more the evil men are making at their company relative to the women. And guess what? Women actually got paid more. So how does that fit into the leftist narrative of gender inequality and wage disparity? We'll take a look. Plus, the House of Representatives is scheduled to vote on a resolution aimed squarely at Representative Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic comments over and over again. But there's pushback, namely from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We'll look at some of the comments, plus a whole lot more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
God bless the United States of America.
All right, first of all, folks, I want to just thank you for all your support for the show. You know, it's relatively new, and after Monday's show, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, which was a big milestone for me. We're going to keep growing, keep doing it, and so I really appreciate all the comments you've been leaving. In fact, on Friday's show, we're going to dive into some of the comments, some feedback, some questions people have asked me, and I'm going to give some responses and just get a little interaction going. So please leave comments. They may make it on Friday's show. And thanks for joining me and supporting the show. Please tell your friends and subscribe. Hit the bell so you get notified. And let's dive into the show. So first of all, we're going to talk about Google because it's just so funny. They did this annual survey. You know, they're one of these social justice warrior companies along with, you know, almost all the big tech companies now. And so they want to address gender inequality. So they've got to find out just how much more the men are making. So because of course they're making more, and then adjust it, you know, correct this grave injustice. So when they got the data back, they found something that's just remarkable. And that is that the women actually made more. So their whole narrative is that they don't know what to do about it because the men were getting paid less. Now they've got to make these wage adjustments and actually compensate the men for the disparity. And it just goes into this narrative, this myth of this wage gap that men, you know, systemically in society make more than women. And we're going to get into some interesting stats, some myth busting we'll do in a little bit, but I wanted to go over this New York Times story on Google because it just really brings to light how misguided these companies are where they try to right wrongs that don't exist, but they fit a leftist narrative that just makes them feel good. So here's what the New York Times had to say about Google's recent survey. Take a look. When Google conducted a survey recently to determine whether the company was underpaying women and members of minority groups, it found, to the surprise of just about everyone, that men were paid less money than women for doing similar work. It goes on. The story, which just proportionally led to pay raises for thousands of men, is done every year, but the latest findings arrived as Google and other companies in Silicon Valley face increasing pressure to deal with gender issues in the workplace, from sexual harassment to wage discrimination. So it's funny that, you know, they did this to adjust for the women disparity, and they find out that it's the men that were actually behind the eight ball as far as wages goes. And that's because there are a lot of factors involved. It's not companies, you know, singling out women or discriminating against women. In fact, as we've talked about in other shows, if you're a woman or a minority, as far as, you know, jobs, as far as college entrances, things like that, you have a leg up. You have a greater chance of getting that particular job. You have a better chance of getting into that particular college because of the government programs and these incentives for minorities and women. That's just the way it is in today's society. So to go the opposite route, to claim that, you know, women are being discriminated against as far as wages, their own survey found that it wasn't true. But let's dig in. The New York Times goes on. Here's more. Google seems to be advancing a flawed and incomplete sense of equity by making sure men and women receive similar salaries for similar work, said Joel Emerson, chief executive of Paradigm, a consulting company that advises companies on strategies for increasing diversity. That is not the same as addressing equity, she said. which would involve examining the structural hurdles that women face as engineers. All right, so I brought that one up because, anytime you have a company that's, sole purpose is to increase diversity, that should be a red flag right there. And it's just funny what they say in that they want women and men to be paid equally, but the fact that Google is addressing that and striving to pay men and women equally, that doesn't solve the problem. That's not really what we're looking for, because they're always looking for a problem, because if there's a problem, there's a victim. And if there's a victim, you can point to a bad guy, which is someone on the right. And so it's just funny that this person from Paradigm, this, diversity company, says that paying them equally isn't addressing the real problem, because they'll always find something else. They'll always find someone who's, being left behind, as they say. And you just have to really watch out for that, because as these companies, strive to pay equally, there'll always be something that someone else is saying, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. They have a disadvantage. This white man has some advantage, just from, being white and being a man, which is actually advantageous these days. So, but it addresses, the report also talked about some of these myths. And as you recall, there was a memo that got leaked and circulated because someone at Google was brave enough to point out the craziness of some of these policies. And the New York Times actually brought that up. Here's one more clip from the New York Times. It says, Google's workforce, especially in leadership and high-paying technical roles, is overwhelmingly male and mostly white and Asian. Its efforts to increase diversity have touched off an internal culture war. In 2017, James Damore, a software engineer, wrote a widely circulated memo criticizing the company's diversity programs. He argued that biological differences and not lack of opportunity explain the shortage of women in upper-tier positions. And so he's absolutely right. And that's why I want to address some of these facts, some of these myths, because they talk about this wage gap. If you look at any tweets from, Alyssa Milano or celebrities or anyone that just gives a quick leftist soundbite, they'll talk about this, for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 77 cents. And they use that as just a be-all, end-all term or phrase that shows, that there's some injustice there. But they don't look at the facts. They don't look at the jobs that men tend to go to versus what women go to. They don't look at the number one reason for a disparity in wages comes down to two words, and that's personal choices. Women tend to choose different careers than men. There's differences in how men think and women think, and how men act and women act, and just interests and likes and things like that, passions. And so PragerU, I'll put a link to their video in my description, but I wanted to just point out some of these things that leads to this difference in wages, because when you see it, it just points out the obvious. Now, so they cited in their video a study by Georgetown University, which listed the top 5 best paying college majors and the worst 5 paying college majors. And I wanted to look at this list and the percentage breakdown between men and women. Let's take a look. Okay, so this is the top 5 best paying college majors. Number 1, petroleum engineering, 87% male. Pharmaceutical sciences, 48% male. Mathematics and computer science, 67% male. Aerospace engineering, 88% male. And I can attest to that. There was just a whole lot of dudes. Chemical engineering, 72% male. Okay, so of those top 5, only one of them was majority female, and that was pharmaceutical sciences. So let's look at the worst paying ones. You have counseling and psychology, 74% female. Early childhood education, 97% female. Theology and religious vocations, 34% female. Human services and community organization, 81% female. And social work, 88% female. So there, it's completely flipped. Only one of those 5 was majority male. So if you look at that, men are overrepresented in the fields that pay more, and women are overrepresented in the fields that pay less. They choose to go into these fields. So that's going to lead, obviously, to differences in wages and benefits and things like that. It's not some kind of grand evil plan. It's just the differences between men and women and the careers they tend to like more than others. So take a look at that. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description.
God bless the United States of America.
The Democratic field is beginning to take shape, even though it's the answer to a trivia contest, who is the guy who lost to Trump in 2020. But they're beginning to sort through their vast number of candidates, and some clear patterns are emerging. First of all, one big element is Biden isn't making it. In the national polling, he's got like 26% of the vote, basically tied with Sanders. Now, everybody knows Joe Biden. Everybody's watched him for decades, 8 years as vice president. And if they don't vote for him, they're not going to vote for him. And most likely the ones who are voting for him don't know the other candidates well enough. And with a glittering field like this for the identity politicians of women and blacks and all of that, there really are a lot of other people to vote for other than the dull old white man who is vice president. And I think but Biden is pacing the field, but he's going to fall back very quickly. Sanders, on the other hand, is showing real strength. He's running first in New Hampshire. He's within 2 points of Biden nationally, and really has residual strength coming from 2016. And his fundraising shows that his list is still alive, fertile, and active. And with the California primary being moved to fourth in line, so you have Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and then California, where 14% of the delegates will be selected, it's a huge ramp up. And nobody through normal fundraising can afford that. But Sanders can, since he has an email base and he's really using it to develop his funding ability. He probably can amass the capital to do that. The other trend that's developing is the woman field is shaping out a little bit. Klobuchar was badly hurt by the stories of her abusing her staff. I think they're pretty sexist. I think many men do that, and they never catch hell for it, but she is. And she deserves it, and I think it's sidelining her. Gillibrand, I think, will never be able to do well because of her background in defending tobacco. I did a video on that a couple of months ago, and I'll do it again, where she was in charge of covering up the research that proved that tobacco caused cancer, so that the tobacco execs could testify to Congress that there was no such research and not be guilty of perjury. And she was the one, as a lawyer, who did that cover-up. And also her relatively conservative voting record in the House, an A from the NRA. And we may like that, but the Democrats won't. And I think that Elizabeth Warren is fading. She hasn't really come through with the punch she needs to. In New Hampshire, Sanders is at 26% of the vote in first place, and she's at 6 or 9% of the vote in fourth place. And she's right next door. Everybody in New Hampshire gets Boston TV as their main television. So Warren is basically their home state senator. And if they're not voting for her, the Democrats at least, I don't think she can pick up steam. And throughout the country, she's running behind Harris in all of the polling, even though she's been working on her national image for 5 years, and Harris has only just started. Booker, too soon to tell. But when you look at Harris, you're looking at a candidate who really is gathering momentum. First of all, she's moved the California primary up, as I said. And since she's got statewide recognition, having been the Attorney General and the Senator, she's the only one that doesn't have to make that steep financial leap. She can just run on her current level of name rec and support and win a victory that could knock everybody else out. And secondly, her announcement has been smoother. She hasn't run into the obstacles that Warren has over her pretending to be a Cherokee Indian, and Gillibrand has had, and Klobuchar's had from her staff. And she's got a good, clean launch. And at this point, if I'm handicapped, I know 6 weeks ago, I said I thought it would be Warren against Sanders. Now I think it'll be Harris against Sanders. But this is all subject to change. It's very, very early, and I'll keep you posted. But again, this is the answer to a trivia contest. Donald Trump is getting reelected.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.
Have you been leasing a property for your business or renting storage space? Are you tired of paying rent year after year? Call the experts at General Steel to own a building at up to 30% off now.
I'd been renting a building and paying someone else's mortgage, but General Steel showed me how I could own a space tailored to the needs of my business and for less than renting.
Call General Steel now at the number on your screen for our current building specials and to price your metal building system today.
My building's the dream I've had since finishing my house 14 years ago. I've been using it for a garage, workshop, and storage area for my tools and equipment, and I can't believe how great it turned out.
The economy is improving and the price of steel is expected to rise. Stop waiting. It could cost you thousands. Call General Steel now to see how you can own for less than you thought. Stop waiting to start your business or expand your operation. Call General Steel now.
Call 877-484-7002.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business, according to The Secret War, a shocking new research report. I just read it. And folks, I was amazed to learn why banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get The Secret War free. Just call the number on the screen, no charge, from the folks at Swiss America, and get this. Did you know simply spending cash today may be enough to have you branded as a potential criminal? That's right. The new war on cash is really a war against all freedom-loving Americans. The Secret War is yours free, so call the number on the screen and you can tell them Pat Boone gave you the number.
It's a little early for me to get in trouble and make predictions, but I was right about Trump in 2016, wrong about Romney, but I think that Trump is now increasingly likely to win re-election. His favorability, that is the job approval, has remained fairly constant at 43, 44, and 45%. Rasmussen has him up at 49, 50 routinely. But let's assume for the moment that he's overstating, because Rasmussen is polling likely voters, whereas everybody else is just polling registered voters or adults. And the theory is that this early, you really can't tell who's a likely voter, so you need to poll everybody. As the turnout swells, the number of likely voters and registered voters tends to merge. So the theory is anticipate all voters. So if you use that measurement, Trump will go into the election with about 45% of the vote deciding to vote for him. There are any number of polls that put it at that. And then you have 55% that have decided not to vote for Trump. And the question is, who do they vote for? And I believe that the Democratic Party is showing a tremendous capacity for suicide by moving so dramatically and so aggressively to the left. And I think that they are very likely to nominate someone who is unelectable. If they start with someone who's electable, like Biden, by the time they get finished with them, he either will have moved unacceptably to the left, or he'll be defeated by somebody who is that far to the left. And the dynamics of the Democratic primary will nominate someone who can't win. And just to be sure they can't win, the party is saddling them with an agenda that assures that they'll be defeated. Medicare for all, which is basically government socialized medicine, open borders, legalization at least of pot and maybe of other stuff. Beto O'Rourke advocates that. The guaranteed annual income, $15 minimum wage, in effect open borders, an agenda that the American people will never support. And yet they're pushing it, and they're being pushed into that agenda. Parties move to the left not because some gray-haired guys in the back room decide that that's what ought to happen, but that the party gets moved to the left, and as a result, so does the candidate and the party and the leadership. They go my followers, and I have to follow them because I'm their leader, is the kind of thing that goes on. So when you combine the probably 10-50% of the electorate that would like to vote against Trump, but probably would not like to vote for the Democratic candidate, and will either stay home or will switch back to Trump, you're looking at probably enough for Trump to win the election. Could be close, could be too close for a prediction this early to be that accurate, so please don't hold me to it. Is certainly a strong likelihood at this point.
God bless the United States of America.
And now I want to go on to what's going on in the House of Representatives. Representative Ilhan Omar, over and over again, has spouted off anti-Semitic comments, and finally the House is taking action, and it was supposed to be today. It looks like it may be delayed, a vote on a resolution basically condemning that type of speech. They're not going to name her specifically, even though they should, but now there's getting pushback from progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others to water down the language or bring in other forms of bigotry and homophobia and things like that, and just on and on, rather than just focusing on the meat right there. And here's a tweet from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She says, "Calling out is one of the measures of last resort, not first or second resort. We do it when repeated attempts to call in are disrespected or ignored. And I believe that Ilhan, in her statement a few weeks ago, has demonstrated a willingness to listen, work with impacted communities." Okay, so how long do you go before you call someone out, according to her? Because this is a pattern of years. She's only been in the House a few months, and even now she's drawn attention in just those few months for recent comments. But her history of anti-Semitism is years old, and you can just search on Twitter and find out that this is a pattern that she has continued in the House of Representatives. She didn't just show up and decide to make a few, off-the-cuff comments that, she was inexperienced and didn't know. This is a pattern for her. So Cortez's, comments just show an idiocy and a lack of reason. But I want to jump into something else that she said that was just amazing. I think these last 2 days she's really gone on a Twitter rant, and she's gone from, Omar's comments to diving into foreign policy in general. And this is where I've got to wonder what she's talking about, because she decided to go into the Afghan war following 9/11, our response to 9/11. And here's what she said. "I remember a time when it was unacceptable to question the Iraq war. All of Congress was wrong, including both GOP and Dem Party, and led my generation into a disastrous, wrong war that virtually all would come to regret, except for the one member who stood up, Barbara Lee. So she then goes on and corrects it. She said, Afghan war, I'm sorry, my apologies. But honestly, we shouldn't have been in either, and we should end the AUMF, which is the authorization to use military force, which came after 9/11, now while we're at it. So basically what she said is that the war in Afghanistan, our response to 9/11 was wrong, and we shouldn't have done anything basically to fight al-Qaeda, which the Taliban in Afghanistan was not only shielding Osama bin Laden, protecting him, but sponsoring their terrorist acts. And so Jake Tapper over at CNN asked, what should we do? And here was her response. She said, I think our decision to enter unlimited engagement in Afghanistan, particularly through the AUMF, plus Congress's abdication of power and decision-making with passage of the AUMF, was a mistake. Other options, targeting the network itself, limited engagement, non-intervention. So a organization sponsored by the Taliban, housed in Afghanistan, comes and kills thousands of Americans, and our response should be non-intervention, limited engagement, and targeting the network. Well, guess what? We targeted the network. We went after them and blew them out of the skies and eventually got bin Laden. That was our response. And her comments, just for someone who was there and saw the plane hit the Pentagon, I just find it absolutely outrageous, absolutely out of touch, and shows that she just does not have a grasp of our American system of government and what we stand for. So that one I just had to pass that along because it really fired me up. And I'll post some more information, some other links to some of her tweets in the description. But we're out of time for today. I wanted to take that little extra time to thank you guys again for supporting the channel. Thanks a lot. Please subscribe. Please check out if your comments make it into Friday's show. Tell your friends about it. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is, there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1, and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to BuyYourTimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. BuyYourTimeshare.com. That's BuyYourTimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
My healthcare costs were going to double this year.
Doubled.
It was down to health care or my student loans.
I found a better way.
It's neighbors helping neighbors.
Liberty Health Share. It's freedom from insurance. At Liberty Health Share, we support each other and keep health costs down. We're changing the way you're paying for health care.
This is the way it should be.
We're all in this together.
Together.
We're changing the way you pay for health care.
The movement to help each other is growing.
Liberty Health Share.
This is the way it should be.
This is how I make a difference.
Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. The third-party pay system is the culprit. It's taking money out of our pockets. Liberty Health Share has solved that issue by being self-pay patients sharing our medical bills. Liberty Health Share is a grassroots movement all across America where people are abandoning the insurance model and instead are meeting each other's costs in community with one another.